I say all the time that I believe that people are inherently good, and that you don't have to force somebody to help someone. That they will just do it because that's who we are as human beings. That's how God made us. We are inherently good human beings, and we will support somebody or help somebody that is in trouble or that needs help without having to be told to do it or forced to do it. And I truly believe that in my heart, that that's the majority of mankind is like that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everything's Okay, a mental health podcast brought to you by Crazy Ham Media. We're super excited to be here and talking about support systems today.
Yes.
And as always, I'm joined by my co-host and father-in-law, Dustin, who is a little bit under the weather. I told him we could figure this out, but no, here he is. Here he is.
That's right. Yeah. So just don't mind the voice unless you like the really deep voice. I kind of like when I'm struggling with the throat because I get this really cool deep voice. But other than that, yeah, man. But I think this was a really good episode to do this time around because of stuff that's been happening. You know, the reason I'm under the weather, the reason, all the kind of stuff. So support has been critical these past week for me, for sure. So I'm excited to dive into this one and kind of talk about it all and just, you know, bust the myths and clear things up about what it is and what it isn't and how to do it and how not to do it. And I think this is going to be a good one, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of misconception about support is, giving their input, giving their input about support or about advice or about, whatever someone else is going through and then expecting them to change. But no, you showed your support by just giving them the advice. It's their decision on what they do with that advice to continue moving forward. Because as people and as individuals who, we go through our own trials and errors and journey throughout our entire tenure on this earth. And, we learn things through our own experiences, and so we automatically try to implement those on different people, and then when those people don't take the advice, then you're like, oh, then you're gonna mess up.
I love that you start with that because I think the other misconception, and it comes from this, I think you touched it really well with the person getting the advice. I'm going to touch it on the flip side of the misconception of the people giving the advice. I think sometimes the people giving advice or support, it's not it's not support if you expect them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Or what you think they should be doing with their life or not with their life, or how to get in a situation or out of a situation, etc. It's not your life, it's theirs. Support means you're there to help them, guide through it. You're there to share your experiences in a similar situation and maybe how you got through it. You're not there to tell them what to do. And I think that's where a lot of people take advice and steer it the wrong way, and then get upset when the person that they're trying to tell what to do with their life doesn't do it. And it's like, that's not real support. And I think because we're all human, like you said, we all go through our own trials and tribulations, and what may have worked for somebody might not work for you. And if your whole point of giving support is to try to change somebody's life the way you think it should be, then you're not really supporting them, you're hurting them. And so I think that's an important thing, and I love that that's how you started it, because I think that's where most people giving support or think that they're giving support make the mistake. And it can cause a lot of friction when things like that happen.
Yeah, well, especially as men, we're always the fix-it type of,
Right.
Anatomy that's instilled into a lot of us who, obviously who, have a lot of testosterone. But yeah, I had to learn that with Emily, specifically my wife, and just how to be like, supportive of her decisions because we are living our lives together, but we are also living two separate lives especially when it comes to like career paths or passions or any of that type of stuff. So I really had to learn a lot of that through trials and tribulations to be like, okay, I can, give my advice, but she does not have to take it or do whatever with it. She just has to know that I'm there for her, being a listening ear. Because if that happens too often, if the person giving the advice gets angry that the person didn't do exactly what the other person said, then that person is not going to come back to you for more advice or
Correct.
support. Like if I keep coming to you for support and you keep telling me how to do things and I don't do that, then there's not going to be that double entendre of coming back and forth of trying to get that support from that particular person. And
Right.
I think that's where a lot of people fall into the trap of trying to control people, because I mean, I feel like inevitably and inherently, like, once you become an adult, everybody becomes a little bit of a control freak. So they are trying to, figure out how to navigate what's best and what's worst. And so to try to pass along that knowledge can be hard to like can be hard for someone else to take on, but then like not do exactly what they say, I guess. But I think it's important to remember, like, just being that open ear and not saying anything, especially as a
Yeah.
man who is consoling their significant other. Just being that open ear, I think, is one of the most important things, because they're not necessarily asking you to help them fix it. They're just asking you to listen. And I don't think a
To
lot of people really understand that concept.
to be seen. We talk about this
Yes.
all the time on this podcast. To literally just felt like they've been seen or been heard. I don't want you to try to help me. I want you to acknowledge that I'm going through this. And sometimes that's the support. Just the simple acknowledgement from somebody that you are going through something. That can be leaps and bounds above any other type of support that can be given, is just somebody taking the time to recognize what you're going through and to say exactly what you said. I'm here if you need me. If you need to call and vent, if you need to call and cry, if you need to call and yell at somebody, I'm here for you. Yeah, I think that's critical. Um the other thing too that I find is sadly, I think this happens a lot more often than people want to admit. If your intent is to, and I'm going to take it a step further of than just you telling somebody how you think they should live their life. If your intent is to only help somebody so that you can use that in the future against them, well, remember when I did this for you? Remember when I did that for you? Remember that? Then that's not support either. That's not legitimate support. That's a method of manipulation and control. Like you said, when even when you're giving that advice about how you think somebody should live their life and trying to that little aspect of control, you're taking it a step further and illegitimate try to control when you hang it over their head. And again, that's the next time when you shut somebody down. Somebody is never going to come to you for advice or for help or for support if all you ever do is hold it over their head that they did it for you. And that's a twisted way to try to live life. I think people, we talk about this all the time as well, and it's funny because we normally get into this end of the conversation with starting with politics, which is hilarious to me. But I say all the time that I believe that people are inherently good, and that you don't have to force somebody to help someone. That they will just do it because that's who we are as human beings. That's how God made us. We are inherently good human beings, and we will support somebody or help somebody that is in trouble or that needs help without having to be told to do it or forced to do it. And I truly believe that in my heart, that that's the majority of mankind is like that. So it's disheartening when you get someone who isn't like that and only does it to manipulate or control or hold over someone. And that's terrifying because mental health is so important. We just recently saw it with an NFL player. People put on masks and they pretend to be fine when they're not. And if they're terrified to ask for help or support because of a situation like that, or a different situation, that's where we get ourselves in trouble. That's where we lose people because they're scared to ask for help, right? And I'm trying to transition into that part of it. It's about asking for help and knowing who you can go to and who you can't for support. And if we put people in situations where they're scared to ask for help, we things can end badly, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, there's so many different situations just throughout the time that you and I have known each other that have, we've leaned on each other. We've leaned on our circle of people to be there for us. And, 99% of the time, that's what happens. So, I mean, to find those people, and I think like that's like another important thing about a support system. It doesn't have to be your family, even
It
though
doesn't.
it's always much better if it is your family. But finding that cultural circle group of people who can help you through, a similar instance that they have went through. I think that's the biggest thing too. Finding support in a place where similarities can be had, especially when it comes to mental health, or especially when you're chasing a dream, or when you're, going after a different career path or anything like that. If you know somebody who's kind of been in that same situation and you're comfortable with them, that's probably who you should talk to most about your anxieties of that situation. Like, for example, starting a new career path, as what I'm kind of doing right now as far as the day job, and being able to step into a situation that I had literally zero experience with and being able to adapt it. That's kind of how I felt about with Emily, because she came from a, barista, Starbucks, coffee shop type of background, but then now she's working for a community college. Like, that's a huge, drastically, completely 180
Yeah.
jump. So like that's completely different career field. So it's stuff like that. And I mean, especially like a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, when I was going through my mental breakdown, when I was contemplating suicide, you were there and you were like, no, we're going to go to the hospital. You're going to get professionally seen. And since then, my life has completely changed. And I also feel like, too, the older and older you get, the more comfortable you get in your own skin, to where like you are able to adapt to these tools that you are given throughout your life with the different experiences, and you're able to use those tools accordingly to make sure you are the happiest that you can be.
Well, and you were when you were at that point, um, it was because I too had been at that point in my life. Not 4 years ago, but at one point in my life, I too contemplated it, and I remember how I was, and it was I didn't want to hear from anybody. Nobody could tell me I was not thinking the right way, or that I was overreacting, that it was all in my head, or you're just blah 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 blah. I wanted none of that, and I knew you wanted none of that. And I think when you said at the top of this little segment about how it doesn't necessarily always have to be family, right? Because sometimes I think family is the worst people that can try to help you and give
It's
you
true.
support. You hope that it's them that gives the best, but sometimes it's the worst. And I just knew that that's not what you needed right now. You didn't need me to be your friend, or your father-in-law, or your whatever, to guide you and say, "Oh, I tried to commit suicide once too, and this is what I did," and blah blah. I thought you at that point needed an outside voice, someone to validate that you were going through it, and someone to just listen and help you. And I thought that was the most critical thing. Like, just let me get him somewhere that will not be biased, not be coming from a point of love, coming from a point of friendship. Let it just be a stranger who will listen and be real, and go from there. And that's why I did that. I wanted to just grab you and say, "Hey, let's get through it. Let's talk about it. This is, but everybody's journey is different." And I knew at that point that's not what you needed or wanted. You needed just somebody to hear you and see you. And I felt like the best way to do that was to just say, "Well, I'm not going to take no for an answer, but I'm not also going to try to force down my opinion. I'm just going to bring you, and you're going to get, and then we can talk." And that's exactly how that went down. That's then we talked about shared experiences and what I went through and how I dealt with it. And I feel like sometimes that's it. And then the other time is like when you were saying, sometimes it's just knowing who the people are that you can reach out to. I went through a very stressful situation this week where I almost lost my mother, and I was in the hospital with her, and we weren't sure if she was going to make it. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to hear from anybody. I didn't want anybody to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine." That's the worst. I can't imagine what you must be going. You're right. You can't. So don't even try to tell me anything, right? But there's certain people, and I simply made a text to one individual, and I said, I could just really use a reassuring voice right now. Just somebody that's upbeat and can say, you got this. And you know, I the response wasn't even a you got this, everything's gonna be okay, I know you're strong, blah blah blah. It's like, where are you? You need food and coffee. Yeah, I know you probably haven't eaten. I know you probably haven't slept. I know you probably haven't done this. It's little things like that. Like somebody recognizing that you probably haven't eaten or slept in a few days. What do you really need as opposed to somebody telling you something you don't want to hear, right? And it's things like that. And so if you have those people in your circle and you just know your people, that's the best kind of support, in my opinion. The people that just know exactly what you need when you need it. Because those people will always be there when you do need the conversation, when you do need to talk or cry and let it all out. Sometimes you do just need some fucking coffee and food, like at the moment. So I agree with you. I really like, and I'm just gonna say to everybody that through this past week or so, or 2 weeks after, if you're whenever you're listening to this, but thank you for being the support system, for being the circle, because I wouldn't have gotten through it without it, and that's why I was so thrilled when we talked about this being the show that we were going to do, and I think. I guess what I'm my point I'm trying to make some, to bring it all full circle with that moment is helping someone or giving somebody support doesn't mean saving them. You don't have to save someone to support someone. You just have to be there. And they got to save themselves. It's like, only you can dig yourself out of what you're going through. And somebody recognizing and seeing it and being there and just in whatever way, that's great. But they can't do the saving, right? You've got to do that yourself. We talk about that all the time too. You've got to do the work. You can change your life. You can fix your life if a lot of people determine broken or whatever. But you've got to do the work. You can't rely on somebody else to do the work. That's not support. That's, like I said, that's not helping. That's hurting, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I like what you said too, and talking about the people who support you aren't even necessarily there to give you advice, or especially if they're not in person. Like, if you're someone's going through a hard time, like it's always difficult to convey that you're there for them through
Right.
text message. But just being able to bring people food, go and pick up the mail, go and run the errands that they didn't get to do. That type of support is also very necessary and very seen by the person who is going through the situation. There's a reason why in so many movies and in life, you see when there's a funeral, especially when it's like somebody younger, a parental figure that passed away before their time, and young kids and things like that. Like casseroles get brought to the open or the house after the funeral. It's so that these people don't have to worry about simple things like meals or doing
That's right.
laundry or, just small things like that. So support can come in many different ways. It can come from being that listening ear, giving advice, or like you had, where somebody was just able to feed you, was just able to make sure the small tasks were getting done
Yeah.
because you were going through such a big situation. Because I mean, it is very hard, like you were talking about. It's so hard to be in that situation, especially if you're not there in person, to know what to say and what not to say. Because you always want to teeter that line. You don't want to overstep, especially in this crazy point. So, as the person who is giving the support, always choose your words wisely. And if you overthink a phrase or overthink something you're about to say, just take a little bit longer, remove yourself from the situation, still think about it. And if you still think it's important or something that you feel like can be imposed on the other person, as a benefit, then say it. But don't irrationally say things like off the cuff in those situations because they could come off a little colorful, I
Well,
guess you could say,
and
right?
sometimes the best thing to say is not to say anything at all, right?
Exactly.
The universe, man, it just plays. I like literally for whatever reason, Sally Field kept coming up this week, and they showed this clip from Steel Magnolias, and this clip plays right into exactly what you were just talking about, and me trying to like say that sometimes the best is to not say anything. It's the scene where she just basically loses her shit in the cemetery after the funeral, and initially her little support group is trying to guy console her and say, oh, we're this was gonna be, and this is and then she just like basically says shut up and loses her shit and just starts screaming about how life isn't fair and it should never have to be like this and blah, and they knew in that moment just to step back and not say anything. Just let her unleash and don't say anything. Don't, and I think that's critical. Sometimes the best thing to say is absolutely nothing at all. Let somebody just process, let somebody just go. And then the other part of that scene that I love so much is sometimes the best way, even in the roughest situations, is to remind people that we're all just in this together, and a smile, a little bit of humor can go a long way of getting people through a very bad situation. And at the end of that scene, she just screams about how she just wants to hit someone, and they throw Weezer in front of her. Here, hit Weezer. We've all wanted to do it, and she laughs. She breaks down and laughs at it. And so sometimes maybe the simplest of things, just a little bit of humor to especially I feel like when somebody's about to crack. Especially when somebody's about to crack, just that little bit of humor to save them from going over the edge, to remind them that we're gonna get through. You are gonna be okay. We're all gonna just look back and laugh at this at some point, no matter how serious the situation is. And I feel like in those type situations, for sure, because I've been through way too many of them. When you lose somebody, that's what they would want you to do. That's it. They don't want you to cry. They don't want you to be miserable. They don't want you to be like that. They want you to go on with your life and just be happy. And I feel like in those situations, if you can bring a little humor and say, they're probably sitting up there laughing their ass off right now at how you're acting. Like, can you just do? So my point being is, though, sometimes, like you said, you choose the words carefully, and sometimes choosing the words carefully means don't say anything. Like I've been in, and I'm sure you have too, so many situations where I would rather just people not say a damn word to me. Just shut up because you don't know what I'm going through, or you can't possibly imagine how I'm feeling right now. So I don't need you to say anything to me, and that's the support that I need right now. Right? I mean, it's perfect. It's
Yeah, it's simple gestures like a holding of a hand or,
yes,
putting
yeah,
your hand on a knee or, rubbing someone's back. It can be very small. And like you said, like we've been talking about this whole episode, support comes in many different ways. Like, for example, obviously transitioning a little bit, we are chasing the dream. We
yeah,
are wanting to be filmmakers, especially with it being in a day and age of social media and putting it all out there and like, basically forming our own personas, kind of an enhanced version of ourselves to put out there to promote, to
right.
do all of these things. A support system like would just do the smallest little thing, like share, just the smallest little. You don't have to do it for every single one, but do it every once in a while to where we notice. That's the type of thing that, because I feel like because the filmmaking entertainment industry is such a slow burn of a
It is
process. We've talked about
the
this many, many
10-year
times.
overnight success.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like, we talk about from when we first started to where we are now. When we first started, when we first announced this is the company, this is what we're doing, these are the stories we want to make, everybody was gung ho, everybody was supportive, everybody's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then as times go on, and we still try to stay relevant in the sense of promoting things and building our company and building our brand and building our name to where like people kind of get, I don't want to say tired of it, but they get used to it. They just see it and then they just let it go by. It's like the smallest little thing, like a share, or a heart, a just or a comment, something small, saying that's cool, just acknowledging that we're doing that. The acknowledgement will go a long freaking way, because if you are someone who I love in particular, and we see each other on a weekly basis, and this is such a big part of my life, and this is a big part of my life, and you never ask me how it's going.
Yes.
How do you think that's gonna make me feel?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna make me feel like you don't even care, or like I should never bring it up, or just that type of stuff.
You
It
didn't.
doesn't have to be every conversation. I promise it doesn't. I get it. What we're doing is a niche thing, and as passionate as we are, that is only a select few people, and you may not be as passionate about it. That's okay. But every once in a while, just ask, how's the project going?
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
see any cool entertainment news? How's the podcast? Anything like that, It's the small things that will make me feel seen, will make you feel seen, and just creators in general, because creators have the hardest time finding the community, finding their support system, and pushing them through the hard times, because there's so many points in your journey as a creator where you fall down on your face and don't feel like getting back up, because you're like, what is the point? Well,
Right.
the point is happiness. The point is purpose. The point is chasing the mofo dream. So that's what it's all about, right?
And for the support system to recognize that it is a journey.
Yes.
Being a filmmaker, being in the entertainment industry is a journey. And we just had a friend. We just had a friend who's been doing it longer than we have and has had up and down successes. Define a success or a failure, right? That's on how you define success or failure. But has been doing it for a very long time. Just landed a huge deal with Apple. Just after all these years. And
Yeah.
right. And so
Previous
it's
guest on this podcast,
yeah,
JS
yeah,
Mayok.
and
Yeah.
has been hugely supportive. He is one of those support people for us who recognizes what we do and every now and then reaches out and says, "Hey, I listened to the podcast," or "Hey, I saw this," and but the point being is that the people in your support system have to understand that it is a process. It's not an overnight thing. You don't just put out a movie and become famous. You don't just put out a movie and become rich. By the way, if you're doing it for fame and fortune, you're doing it for the wrong reason. But they have to understand that, and I think it's critical talking about this end of the support system and what we're trying to do with Chasing the Dream is we don't expect you to understand what we're doing or how we're doing it or what we're going through, because like you said, it's a very niche pocket. The entertainment industry is extremely small for people who don't know. And it's a literally a blink and you miss it faction of the world. And so we don't expect you to understand it. We just want you to acknowledge it. You don't have to understand why we're feeling so great or feeling so shitty. We just need you to acknowledge that we are feeling so great or so shitty about something we've done. And that's it. That's the support. I think, like you said, nothing makes me happier to hear somebody say that they watched the film. After all these years that it's been out, people are still finding it and still watching it. And nothing makes me happier when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I just saw your film. Oh my God." Or, "Hey, oh man, I listened to the podcast this week and I didn't even know that. What's going on?" Something like that. They don't even need to understand what it means about potential takeovers by Paramount or whatever. They don't even need to know what it means. Just saying that they listened and said, "You informed me about something that I didn't know," that's enough. That's like what we're doing matters. Somebody learned something from what we're doing. And that can be the world, man. That it's just, and on the other side of that, like you said, it's crushing when people around you don't even ask. They can't even tell you what the current episode was about or what the film you're writing is, even like what, is it a comedy, is it a drama, what's going on? Because they don't know, because they didn't take the time to pay attention to what you were saying or what you had been posting. That can be very crushing, very defeating. And yeah, that's a hard thing, and that's when I think people in the entertainment industry rely on each other as the support system. It's like, well, at least we've got us. I mean, that's crushing, man. But also it's I don't know, it's it's a balancing act. I think, especially when we're talking about support, because I was literally just talking about this today, and it's an odd thing. It's like I'm a very private person, a very private person. And yet, we're in a very public dream, chasing a very public career path. And we are at the point where we get recognized, and the first couple times it's really cool. And then you're like, oh God, I'm a private person. I'm just trying to eat my hamburger. Somebody walks up and says, dude, it calf. Oh my God, it's bonk. And you're like, I'm just trying to eat my hamburger. And so it's that balancing act of, you want the support of somebody saying they just watched your movie or they just listened to your podcast, but then you also be like, can you just step off while I eat my hamburger? So support can be tricky. Support can be like, sometimes you try to give support and be, when the other people don't want it, and then you're not there when they need it. And so, and that is life. That is, I think, to sum it all up, that's life, right? Hey, I need some support and you're nowhere to be found. Hey, I don't want anything from you and here you are in my face. It's just trying to balance it all and just find it. But that's, I think, everything you do in life, that is the case.
Yeah, most definitely. And as we are rounding out this episode, there are a few questions that I feel like, you should ask yourself and reflect on your life and your own personal journey as the listener. Who is one person right now that you could reach out to this week? Or multiple people? You make sure you have those people so you are able to know what real support looks like, giving, receiving, and accepting support. And you want to also think about what real support looks like. How do you ask for it? And how do you share stories that remind you that you are not alone? It's always finding that balancing act of trying to relate with somebody, but not trying to overshare if you don't
That's
want
right.
to. So trying to, figure out what you are comfortable with, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. If you are comfortable, that is what support is. That is what you are looking for. But this is such a timely, perfect episode, because this has honestly been on the episode docket for a while, like at least a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah.
And it happened and culminated this week because of everything we've been going through, because of me about to finish school, because of everything that was happening with Mama Polly, with everything happening in our own personal lives. Support comes in many different ways, and we were able to do our bi-weekly therapy session on it because, God is good. Everything happens for a reason. And we're here living our life one day at a time, trying to be as positive as possible and to be just decent human beings. And that's what this podcast is about, trying to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and just also being yourself. That is for sure.
I think so.
Of course, there's plenty of different resources out there. You can go to community groups. You can obviously, we've supported and championed White Flag. That's a very anonymous support app that you can talk about your situation that you're going through. Of course, you can go to therapy. You can talk to your family and friends if you feel comfortable. Just make sure you find that support, because feeling alone is an awful feeling.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Ask for help. That is, I cannot emphasize that enough. And people who are supporting, not just the people who need the support, people who are supporting, ask if they need help. It's not just about asking for help. Ask if you see the warning signs and you ignore them and you don't ask them. Look, sometimes you're going to walk up and say, hey, is everything okay? Or I noticed you're going through some stuff. What can I do? And they're going to bark. They're going to get mad. They're going to shove you off. They're going to be like, I'm fine, dude. My life is great. Get out of my face. But it could be the life-saving moment where, as they're about to contemplate taking their life, they remember that you saw them and instead they call you. If you ignore them, if you don't see that at least they're going through something and mention it, then that I feel like that's on us, because warning signs are missed and we're scared. We're scared to go up to somebody and say, hey man, are you going through some shit? I noticed you're off a little bit. We're scared to do that just as much as they're scared to ask for help. We're scared to acknowledge giving help. And We've got to find that balance because we can't ignore warning signs and we can't ignore asking for help. Man, it's rough, guys. Mental health is rough. It's a real thing, and we've made a lot of progress, and we've come a long ways in addressing it, but we've got a long ways to go. So, yeah, my last just things before you wrap the whole thing up is ask somebody if they need help, and if you are the person in need, ask for help.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. And as always, everybody, be sure to follow us, rate this podcast, subscribe, all the good things. Everything's okay, Pete, on social media. Everything's okay podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can share your personal story with us as well. You can be completely anonymous or just leave your first name at info at crazyantmedia.com, or you can go to our website, crazyantmedia.com. But yeah, guys, we appreciate you listening along, getting crazy with us, and just reflecting on everything. And hopefully you have a good support system out there that will listen to this with you. So I think that would be awesome. For sure.
Absolutely.
And I think it's always important to remember that everything's okay.